The MBR research case study submission template is sort of a complement to the MBR example case study. The example case study has a focus on a story and then a little bit of interpretation. The research case study will place much more emphasis on the theory underlying the case, and we'll kind of use the case as an example of that theory put in application as opposed to being the central part of the article. An MBR research case study article is expected to identify a research question or set of theories of potential interest to manager. It is one of the more theoretically oriented of the templates, though we do want it related to a business problem of some sort. It should specify the academic perspective on the question we're looking at or the theories involved. Ideally, present one or more real-world descriptions involving the question's theories. These are our case studies. We want to employ a narrative format, and whereas the example case study will almost always be a single case, it is quite possible to have 2 or 3 or 4 shorter cases used in the concept of the research case study submission. It should analyze how the situations described conform or fail to conform to the theory. That's why it's often useful to have more than one case in this type of article. And it should identify the management implications of this. If there are no management applications to the theory, it's really unlikely that it will find a place in the MUMA business review. And it should be around 5 to 15 pages. And to some extent, that length will be determined by how many cases and how in-depth the theory is presented. When a research case submission is reviewed by the MBR, they're typically going to look at a number of items. Obviously, the significance of the issues being considered. Is this theory something that would be important to many managers? There's no theory that's going to be important to all managers, but you want to identify a set for whom the issues in the theory might seem particularly useful. The degree to which the outcomes provided by the situations in the related theory are likely to be novel or confusing to practicing managers. We see this a lot in MBR MBR templates. Novelty tells the manager something new. If the manager finds the original idea is confusing, the idea is that your article will clear up the confusion. The article themselves should not be confusing. It's going to be assessed on the degree to which your analysis offers a convincing explanation of the findings in the cases. If the theory doesn't seem to apply to the cases or seems like a stretch, that's going to be harder to get accepted. And of course, you want the findings presented in a way that will engage your readers. True of all MBR submissions. The instructions are the same as the other instructions, which is to say, you want to take this template, save it under a new name. You can delete the instructions page once you're done with it, this page here. Make sure to use the styles that we have provided. Make sure you use the appropriate headings. And most important, most of the MBR submissions have this reviewer appendix, and the reviewer appendix is designed to convince the reviewer that the article has been created in a rigorous way. So here you're going to have to explain why it is that the theory and the examples that you provided are rigorous in their structure, and we'll get to that a little bit later. The research case study cover page mirrors that of almost all the other MBR submissions. You've got a title, you've got a tagline. The tagline is very important. It's what's going to appear on the cover of the journal when the journal is printed. It's going to appear on the website to describe the article. It might go out over social media, Twitter, Facebook, and so forth. And so you really want to write a tagline that captures the essence of what the reader is going to experience when they read the article, but of course it has to be short to constrain to the ways it's going out. You want a series of keywords. These will not appear in the article, but they will help researchers find the article when they're searching at some later date and it's been published. And then you want an executive summary, which will be in the article, and this is the short summary of why the case study or the set of case studies that you've written and the theory are something that a manager should know, and why your findings are interesting. And the idea is that when a manager reads the executive summary, you want them to decide it's worth the investment to look at the larger article. The body of the research case study template is pretty similar to what you would find in an academic research paper. So this is a template that might be used sparingly within the MUMA Business Review. You've got the title of the case, you've got an introduction that explains the context of the business problem, and then you have a review of the research and theory. Now, there are two case study templates for the MUMA Business Review. In the example case study, the case itself, the story, is the star of the show. And we might put a little research and theory in the discussion afterwards. In the research case study, however, the research and theory, in a sense, is the star of the show. And the reason that we have these cases is to test the research and theory, to provide examples of the application of the research and theory, to establish bounds for the research and theory. And so, in a sense, the research and theory is more the star of the show. After you've presented the research and theory, which again you keep to a fairly limited page count, you might no more than a couple of pages if you can avoid it. You then move on to the case or cases that you're describing. In the research case study, it would be expected that you might have more than one case, often to illustrate the boundaries of the theory. And for each one of these cases, you're probably going to want to provide some background, a storyline, an outcome related to the case. Unlike discussion cases, you really want to give an outcome because most research cases look at cause and effect. And you also probably want to explain, in a sense, if it's not self-explanatory, why these cases are here. In many cases, there'll be concrete demonstrations of the theory. In other cases, there'll be ways of showing support for the theory or showing places where the theory does not seem to be supported, and so forth. In a research case study, you'll probably have a fairly significant discussion section. Here's where you interpret the case studies in terms of the theory after you've presented them, and then you'll go on to conclusions, which should be relatively self-contained, as always, so that a reader can jump from executive summary to conclusions, and based upon reading those two pieces of the article, will be absolutely consumed with a desire to read the rest of it. As always, references should be in APA format. The reviewer appendix for the research case study is likely to be one of the more extensive reviewer appendices among the MBRs because you really need to spend a lot of time on design. As for most of the appendices, we start with looking at the underlying business question that is driving the research and the cases that we have selected, or the single case that we have selected. Then we take a look at the case research design, which is particularly challenging when you have more than one case. In other words, why did you choose the case or cases you used? What makes them interesting? What is the process by which they were identified? Are they a single point in time, a snapshot, or are they longitudinal? Why did you choose single case or multi-case design, whichever you chose? Were the selection opportunistic? Was it targeted? How did you find the case? What protocols were used for data gathering? What instruments did you use, if any? What was the experimental design if there's some manipulation that occurs in the case? And by the way, if there is some manipulation that occurred in the case, then you may also need to mention if you got institutional review board approval, since especially if the researcher drove some manipulation, such as a price change, then you have to make sure that human subjects' consequences have been considered. How you gathered qualitative data such as focus groups, interviews, archival information, and what procedure you use for data analysis. Analyzing a case study, because there can be so many sources of evidence, can be a time-consuming process. And in your research appendix, you have to really convince the reviewer that you made a substantial effort to be as rigorous as possible. And it might be worth making that investment because in many cases, a good research case could easily be published in an academic journal. And what you might end up doing is taking some of the reviewer appendix, which is not published, so you don't lose the copyright on that when it's published in MBR. You may basically cut and paste that into a submission to a more academic research journal. You may also want to talk about any kind of supplemental analysis that you performed. You can give us a timeline of how the research was performed. You can think about how your actual protocol varied from what was planned, and any kind of supporting analysis that would be beyond the scope of the article itself. Because remember, in the article itself, we don't want to include all these details because, for the most part, the readership that we are intending is not going to be that interested. But they will be but the reviewers will be, because they're going to be much more interested in the research conduct itself. We move on to discussions and conclusions. Just give us any insights as to how these were developed. And in all case studies, you want to make sure that you've got permissions from the organizations that you work with to publish the case. And you as an author will be certifying that you have these permissions to the journal. But everybody gets egg on their face if we publish something and the organization involved did not realize it was going to be published and gets upset. Because once something is out on the internet, it's very hard to stuff it back into the bottle.